This woman thought she was helping out a friend.
Hello, my name is Julie Snook and welcome to 9 News Watch. The 19-year-old man in that chilling vision has today been jailed for life. Joseph Trevor admitted to raping, strangling and stabbing 18-year-old Megan Newton to death in the UK last year. Cruelly, it happened after Miss Newton had offered the man she knew from school a place to sleep because he could not go home to face his parents after consuming drugs and alcohol. Trevor will serve a minimum of 22 years.
This is the story of the almost perfect murder. In 1971, John List killed his entire family, his wife, children and his mother. And he had meticulously planned the whole thing. After killing them all, he placed the bodies in sleeping bags and lined them up. He also wrote a letter to his pastor explaining why he had to kill them. And then he disappeared. 18 years later, he is remarried and tries to do the whole thing again. But this time he was arrested after a tip was given to the FBI. It took 18 years to capture him. The creepiest thing about all that was that he thought he was trying to save souls.
If you see an ad like this, you should report it to the police. In 2011, a man named Scott Davis saw an ad for a job on Craigslist that paid $300 a week and a place to live to watch over a secluded farm in southeastern Ohio. He immediately responded to the ad, and eventually he got a call back telling him he was one of the job finalists. The final interview was conducted at a local restaurant, and after everything was going well, Davis agreed to climb into the back of the white Buick, while his new employer Jack and his nephew drove them to the farm. They eventually came to a stop on a secluded dirt road, and Jack told Davis that they left some equipment just down the hill and asked Davis to help them carry it up to the car. Jack led the way, but Davis found it oddly uncomfortable that he was walking with Jack and the young man right behind him. Suddenly, Davis heard the click sound of a gun hammer and quickly turned towards the sound. A bullet shattered his elbow and Davis quickly escaped into the woods. Long after sunset, Davis finally found his way to a rural house where he pleaded with the owners to call the police. Turns out, Jack was actually a man named Richard Beasley, and he used Craigslist to lure 3 men into the woods and kill them with his nephew.
She's called the Angel of Death. Beverly Allett was denied jobs from multiple British hospitals because she, failed her nursing exams until she was offered a 6-month contract as a pediatric nurse from the understaffed Grantham and Gustave Hospital. She was only there 2 months before she started attacking patients, targeting 13 children over a 59-day period. She would inject them with air bubbles or insulin to cause cardiac arrest. In total, she killed 4 children and seriously injured 6 others. The hospital called the police after noting the oddly large number of cardiac arrests on the children's ward. They noticed that Beverly was the only one working all those shifts. She was arrested in 1991, received 13 life sentences, and will be eligible for parole in 2022.
This is Israel Keys. He killed a number of people around the world and almost got away with it. I'm going to talk about a particular case that is super disturbing. This is surveillance footage of him kidnapping a worker at a drive-thru coffee shop. This beautiful girl's name is Samantha Koenig. She was 18 years old and she was working that night shift. Her boyfriend was supposed to pick her up that night and take her home since it was a cold winter day, but she was nowhere to be found when he arrived. He told her not to worry, that he was just going to use her for ransom and that if she cooperated, he would let her go. He ended up sexually assaulting her and killing her. After killing her, he leaves her body in the shed and he decides to go on vacation with his wife and daughter for a week. When he comes back, he thaws out her frozen body, has sexual relations with it. He proceeds by putting makeup on her face and sewing her eyes open to make her look alive. Like what? Part 2. Israel took this picture of Samantha holding a newspaper and sent it to her family as ransom. Keep in mind, in this photo, Samantha has already been deceased for almost 3 weeks now. Israel made a deal with her family and asked for $30,000 in return for Samantha. They ultimately agreed and deposited the money since they assumed that she was still alive. He then disposes Samantha's body in a frozen lake and also uses parts of her body as bait to catch fish. He then said that he caught some fish and fed it to his wife and daughter. Like, what?
This is the story of a mummy who might have been a modern murder victim. In the year 2000, a 2,600-year-old mummy of a Persian princess surfaced on the black antiquities market for $11 million. Authorities obtained the mummy and sent it to a museum for testing. The cuneiform inscriptions on her gold breastplate read, "I am the daughter of great King Xerxes." This was such a rare find that countries were literally arguing over who should get the mummy. But then, scholars realized that the Persian inscription on the breastplate was not grammatically correct. And the wooden coffin wasn't the right age. So they ran some tests. And carbon dating revealed that the woman had died in 1996. Part 2 is already up. This is part 2 of the mummy who may have been a modern murder victim. Carbon dating revealed that the woman had actually died in 1996. But the forgery was so intricate that scholars said it would have taken several months and a team of scholars to execute. They would have needed all of these experts in order to execute it. And the cause of death was blunt force trauma. Her vertebrae were broken, her jaw was broken, and she had a huge gash on her stomach. Investigators concluded she was a murder victim. The question of whether she was murdered by the same people who mummified her remains unanswered. They may have simply robbed the grave of a murder victim. But testing revealed that her body had been mummified within 24 hours of her death. So someone may have killed her specifically to pull off this con. The police opened a homicide investigation, but no one was ever arrested. The victim has never been identified, but she was laid to rest in 2008. If you'd like to hear the whole story, we covered this on episode 22 of our podcast, Mystery Team Inc., and like and follow for more mysteries.
July 6th, 2012, Skylar Neese had snuck out of her house at 12:30 a.m. to hang out with her two best friends, Sheila and Rachel. She would never return home and also was a no-show for her work shift that next day. Her family began to worry, so they called authorities and their family and friends. Rachel had just left for church camp, but Sheila was home, so she came over with her mom to help with the search efforts. The two would admit that Skylar had snuck out to hang with them the previous night, but they said this was at 11 p.m. and she was returned home by midnight. This ended up being completely false, so here's what happened. There was a secluded wooded area that they went to often, and once they got there, they got out of the car because they were going to smoke some weed, and they attacked her. They stabbed her over 50 times, dragged her by a tree, and watched her bleed out slowly. Her last words were, "Why?" Their why was because they didn't want to be friends with her anymore, and that's all they would say.
Videos like this irk me because they never tell you the whole story. But don't worry, I got you. Omaima Nelson, aka the Thanksgiving Butcher, came to the US from Egypt at around 18. Omaima had a rough childhood. She was sexually abused by her own father, and he subjected her to female circumcision. Omaima married an American oil worker, but the marriage didn't last long. In the US, she picked up nannying jobs and some modeling gigs as well. At 23 years old in 1991, she married 56-year-old Bill Nelson after only days of knowing each other. On Thanksgiving Day, the couple was alone, and Omaima said that Bill sexually assaulted her in their shared apartment. On December 1st, Omaima ran to her ex-boyfriend's apartment and said she was forced to kill Bill in self-defense and begged Jose to help her dispose of the body. She promised him $75,000 and 2 motorcycles. He called police. Police searched her apartment. In the fridge, they found the head of Bill Nelson wrapped in aluminum foil. He also had burns consisted of being thrown in a deep fryer. In the deep fryer, they found 2 human hands mixed with turkey bits. In Bill's red Corvette were trash bags of his organs, and in the bathroom, his skinned torso was hanging on a clothes hanger. Mama said she had eaten Bill's ribs after cooking them in barbecue sauce. She said nothing was sweeter than the taste of human flesh. 100 pounds of Bill is still unaccounted for.
26-year-old Jodi Arias met 29-year-old Travis Alexander in September of 2006. They dated on and off for about a year and a half. When Travis dated other women, Jodi would get jealous and slash his tires and hack into his social media. When Travis decided to take another woman with him on a business trip, Jodi drove over 1,000 miles to his apartment on June 3rd, 2008 so that she could spend the night with him. At around 5:30 p.m. the following day, while Travis was in the shower, Jodi stabbed Travis 27 to 29 times in the chest and back, shot him in the head, and slashed his throat. His body was found on June 9th. Jodi was arrested in July of 2008, and although she maintained that she acted in self-defense, she was convicted of first-degree murder in May of 2013 and sentenced to life in prison without parole. She is housed at the Department of Corrections in Goodyear, Arizona. She spends her time in prison selling her drawings online and chatting with fans.
You probably recognize this girl. This is 18-year-old Isabella Guzman on trial for the murder of her mother, Yoon Mi Hoi. Growing up, Isabella had a bad relationship with her mother, who she resented for bringing her up in a poorer household than her friends. On August 28, 2013, Isabella's stepfather called the police when he saw blood pooling under the door of the upstairs bathroom, which Isabella and Yoon Mi were inside. This was the second time he had called the police that day, the first call coming after Isabella had threatened her mother by saying, "You will pay." By the time the police arrived, it was too late for Yoon Mi, and Isabella had already fled the scene. She was found the next day still covered in blood, and it was revealed in Yoon Mi's autopsy that Isabella had stabbed her mother a total of 79 times in the face and neck. Isabella was denied the death penalty due to reason of insanity, and she is currently in a mental institute. She claims that she suffered years of abuse at the hands of her family, but there are no current plans for her release.
In 1883, Henry Ziegland broke off his engagement, to which his fiancée responded by taking her own life. The fiancée's brother was so enraged that he sought revenge and set out to kill Henry. He went out to Henry's farm and shot the man who had hurt his sister. Then he turned the gun on himself. Unbeknownst to the brother, Henry didn't die at all. The bullet only grazed him before landing in a tree. After this, Henry went on to live a full life. 20 years after he escaped death, he and his son were cutting firewood when they decided to take down the tree with the bullet in it. But the wood was so tough it was almost impossible to split it with an axe. So they bored some holes in the tree and put small amounts of dynamite inside. Henry and his son stood about 50 feet back away from the tree when they set the explosives off. The bullet, which had waited 20 years for Henry Ziegland, was blown out of the tree at such great force that it hit him in the left temple, killing him instantly.
In November of 2013, 16-year-old Maren Sanchez went to her school's guidance counselor at Jonathan Law High School with concerns about one of her classmates. Maren revealed that 17-year-old Christopher Plaskin was engaging in self-harming behaviors, had suicidal ideations, and showed his willingness to harm other people by bringing knives to school. Although the counselor was mandated by the school and state to report Maren's concerns, it was never done. Maren and Christopher were both juniors at the high school, and most people described them as being friends. Maren was an honor student who was class president in both her freshman and sophomore years and was extremely active in extracurricular activities, serving as the co-manager of the softball and swim teams and a member of the drama club. Christopher played sports and seemed to fit in well at school. People described him as being nice and a class clown, but he could be a little hyperactive at times. Over the years, Christopher developed a crush on Maren and even asked her to go on the junior prom, but Maren declined since she was already preparing to go with her boyfriend. On April 25, 2014, security footage showed Christopher walking into school early, and then he began to pace the school's hallways. After he spots Maren, he walks up to her, pushes her down a flight of steps, attempts to strangle her, then stabs her in the chest and neck. Students and teachers ran to break up the attack, and Christopher was taken to the principal's office in bloody clothing. Once the police arrived, Christopher confessed, saying, "I did it. Just arrest me." Police and paramedics worked on Maren until she was transported to the hospital, but she was pronounced dead a few hours later. Once at the police station, Christopher claimed that he heard voices that told him to stab Maren. But in June of 2016, instead of an insanity defense, he would plead no contest and be sentenced to 25 years with the eligibility for parole in 13. In 2016, Maren Sanchez's estate sued the Milford Board of Education, the city of Milford, and Christopher's parents. The lawsuit stated that the guidance counselor failed to advise the school principal, school security, or others in the school administration about Maren's report, which violated mandatory school policies and state law. It went on to say that Christopher's parents were aware that their son was engaging in self-destructive conduct with knives, which made him a danger to himself and others, but they failed to obtain proper medical treatment for him or prevented him from having access to knives. In 2019, Maren's estate reached a settlement with the city of Milford for $5 million.